Who were the deadliest gladiators to ever step into the blood-soaked sands of ancient Rome? Today, we're ranking the top 12 warriors who shocked the arena and terrified emperors themselves, measured by how they fought, how many battles they survived, and how deeply their legends carved into Roman history. These aren't just fighters. They're legends who changed the course of history with nothing but courage and a blade. Let's enter the arena. Numbers 12. Mevia, the gladiatrix who defied Rome. At number 12, we've got Mevia, the notorious gladiatrix who made Roman men question everything they thought they knew about combat. Born into the 1st century AD during a time when the very idea of a woman in the arena was considered scandalous, Mevia didn't just enter the Colosseum, she dominated it. While most female fighters were relegated to novelty acts or comedic displays, Mevia hunted actual beasts with a spear, fighting boars and other dangerous animals in front of thousands of screaming Romans. The satirist Juvenal couldn't hide his shock when he wrote about her, describing how she fought topless with her breasts exposed, wielding her weapon like a seasoned warrior. This wasn't praise, it was horror. To conservative Romans, a woman choosing the life of blood and sand over traditional roles was unthinkable. But Mevia didn't care. She charged into the arena again and again, each appearance a direct challenge to everything Roman society believed about women. Her courage was undeniable. Facing down wild boars armed with nothing but a spear required nerves of steel. One wrong move meant being gored to death in front of the entire empire. Yet Mevia kept coming back, kept fighting, kept surviving. She lands in Tier 3 because while her cultural impact was massive and her bravery unquestionable, her documented victories are limited to satirical accounts rather than hard historical records. But if a woman fighting boars in front of Rome's elite doesn't shake you, wait until you hear about the gladiator who helped turn a prison break into Rome's worst nightmare. Number at 11. Oenomaios, the first commander of freedom. At number 11, we have Oenomaios, the Gallic warrior who helped transform a desperate escape into a full-scale war. Born in Gaul, or possibly Galatia, Oenomaios was captured, enslaved, and thrown into the gladiator school at Capua alongside two other men who would change history, Spartacus and Crixus. In 73 BC, when 70 gladiators armed with kitchen knives and pure rage smashed their way out of that training facility, Oenomaios wasn't just along for the ride. He was one of the 3 core commanders who led them to freedom. Picture this. Roman praetor Gaius Claudius Glaber has the escaped slaves trapped on Mount Vesuvius. He's confident. He's got superior numbers. He's got the high ground. Then Oenomaios and his brothers do the impossible. They weave vines into ropes, rappel down the cliffside in the dead of night, circle behind the Roman camp, and slaughter the soldiers in their sleep. It's not just a victory, it's a statement. Slaves aren't supposed to outthink praetors. Oenomaios led raids through southern Italy, each battle adding more escaped slaves to their growing army. His tactical mind turned scattered rebels into an organized fighting force. But the life of a rebel commander is short and brutal. Somewhere between 73 and 72 BC, during one of those violent campaigns, Oenomaios fell in combat. He lands in Tier 3 because while his strategic brilliance was undeniable and his role in sparking Rome's greatest slave rebellion was crucial, his time in the spotlight was too brief to match the legends who fought for years. But here's the thing about that slave rebellion. One of Oenomaios' brothers would take it so much further that Rome would still be traumatized for generations. Number 10. Hermes, the weapons master. At number 10, we've got Hermes, the gladiator who didn't just master one fighting style, he mastered them all. Active during the late 1st century AD, Hermes wasn't your typical arena specialist. Most gladiators trained in a single weapon class their entire careers. Swordsmen stayed swordsmen. Trident fighters stayed with the net and trident. But Hermes? The poet Martial called him the favorite fighter of the age and spent an entire poem listing his absurd skill set. Spear, trident, heavy sword, net. It didn't matter. Hand him any weapon, and he'd dismantle his opponent with surgical precision. What made Hermes truly terrifying wasn't just his versatility, it was his control. Martial wrote that Hermes was taught to conquer, not to kill. In an arena designed for death, Hermes won by breaking his opponent's will without taking their lives. He'd disarm them, humiliate them, force them to yield without delivering the killing blow. This took far more skill than simple butchery. But Hermes wasn't just a fighter. He was also a trainer at the gladiator school, and he terrified even his own students. Imagine learning swordplay from a man who's defeated champions in every weapon style. Every mistake you make, he's already seen it 1,000 times. Every technique you try, he invented the counter years ago. His reputation was so fearsome that just watching him train was said to drain the confidence from other fighters. He lands in Tier 3 because despite Martial's glowing praise, we lack the concrete fight records carved in stone that other gladiators have to prove their legacy. Still, a man who terrifies both opponents and students is formidable. But what happens when a gladiator gets offered freedom 4 times and keeps saying no? Keep watching. Number 9. Carpophorus, the Beast Slayer. At number 9, we have Carpophorus, the man who didn't fight other gladiators. He fought nightmares. Active during the late 1st century AD, likely under Emperor Domitian, Carpophorus was a bestiarius, specialist who entered the arena against wild animals instead of human opponents. And not just any animals. We're talking lions, bears, leopards, buffalo, and even rhinoceroses. The poet Martial watched him perform and wrote in absolute awe about a man who seemed more myth than human. Here's what Martial claimed. Carpophorus killed 20 different animals in a single day. Not 20 of the same species, 20 different types of beasts. He'd dispatch a bear with his spear, then immediately face a charging lion, then turn around and take down a leopard before the crowd could even catch their breath. Martial joked that if the mythical hydra or chimera actually existed, Carpophorus could probably handle them too. The most insane feat? Martial describes Carpophorus killing a rhinoceros with a single spear thrust. Anyone who's seen a rhino knows they're walking tanks covered in armor-thick hide. Their charge can flip a cart and crush a man instantly, and Carpophorus dropped one with a single, perfectly aimed strike. Why does this matter? Bestiarii had even worse survival rates than regular gladiators. Animals don't follow choreography. They don't tire the way humans do. They're unpredictable killing machines driven by instinct and fear. Facing them repeatedly was basically a slow-motion death sentence. That Carpophorus survived enough shows to become famous across the empire meant he was operating at a level that seemed almost supernatural. He lands in Tier 3 because while his individual feats were absolutely spectacular and his courage unmatched, he fought beasts rather than the elite human gladiators who define the top of our list. But speaking of elite gladiators, what happens when the Emperor of Rome himself decides to step into the arena? The answer will shock you. Number 8, Commodus, the Emperor Gladiator. At number 8, we have Commodus, the Roman emperor who thought he was Hercules reborn and proved it by fighting in the arena hundreds of times. Born into absolute power as the son of the philosopher Emperor Marcus Aurelius, Commodus ruled Rome from 180 to 192 AD. But ruling wasn't enough for him. He wanted to fight, not as a symbolic gesture or a one-time publicity stunt. Commodus fought in the arena over 700 times, and ancient historians couldn't decide whether to be impressed or disgusted. Here's the scandal. Emperors weren't supposed to fight. The arena was for slaves, criminals, and desperate volunteers. For the most powerful man in the world to strip down and enter the sand was considered a grotesque humiliation of the imperial office. But Commodus didn't care. He declared himself the reincarnation of Hercules, commissioned statues of himself dressed as the legendary hero, and charged the Roman treasury enormous appearance fees for his own fights. Now, let's be honest. Were these fair fights? Absolutely not. Commodus's opponents often fought with blunted wooden weapons, or were injured veterans forced to face the emperor at a massive disadvantage. The fights were rigged from the start. But here's the thing. Ancient historians grudgingly admit Commodus was legitimately skilled. He had been training since childhood with the empire's best gladiators. His weapon technique was real and deadly. When he decapitated ostriches with specially designed crescent arrows or fought as a heavily armored secutor against handicapped opponents, the crowd watched with a mixture of awe and horror. Every victory was announced with fanfare. Every kill was another proof of his supposed divine status. It wasn't just entertainment. It was propaganda wrapped in blood. He lands in Tier 2 because despite the rigged matches and the artificial nature of his victories, his genuine combat skill and the sheer audacity of an emperor fighting hundreds of bouts cannot be ignored. He showed that even with every advantage, you still needed real ability to survive the arena. But if a cheating emperor lands in Tier 2, imagine what a fair fighter who defeats champions could accomplish. The next warrior proved that skill conquers experience. Number 7. Spiculus, Nero's favorite. At number 7, we have Spiculus, the gladiator who became so beloved by Emperor Nero that when Rome burned, the emperor wanted him there at the very end. Fighting as a murmillo during Nero's reign from 54 to 68 AD, Spiculus trained at the same legendary Capuan school that had produced Spartacus and Crixus generations earlier. But while those warriors led rebellions, Spiculus became the arena's greatest showman. Victory after victory, he climbed the ranks until Nero himself became completely obsessed with him. The emperor didn't just watch Spiculus fight. He showered him with wealth that would make modern athletes jealous. Palaces, vast estates, mountains of gold, privileges that were absolutely extraordinary for someone of gladiator status. Some sources suggest Spiculus belonged directly to the emperor's personal stable of fighters, making him essentially Rome's first state-sponsored celebrity athlete. His most famous victory came against the veteran champion Aptonitus, a gladiator with 16 consecutive wins under his belt. 16 times Aptonitus had entered the arena. 16 times he'd walked out alive and victorious. Then he faced Spiculus, and that streak ended in blood and sand. The upset made Spiculus an instant legend. Graffiti celebrating Spiculus appeared across the empire. His image was carved onto luxury items like the famous Chevagna glass cup. Children played games pretending to be him. He'd transcended the arena to become a true cultural icon. Then came 68 AD, and everything collapsed. Nero's reign fell apart. The Senate turned against him. The Praetorian Guard abandoned him. As enemies closed in from all sides, Nero made one final desperate request. He wanted Spiculus to deliver a blow. It would be an granted by the hand of his favorite champion, the only person he trusted. But Spiculus couldn't be found. Whether he had fled the city, was already dead, or simply refused the summons, we'll never know. Nero was forced to take his own life without his champion by his side. He lands in Tier 2 because while his victories were absolutely legitimate and his fame undeniable across the empire, we lack the detailed fight-by-fight records that would push him higher on our list. But fame and wealth mean nothing compared to what the next gladiator achieved with pure skill alone. Number 6. Marcus Attilius, the debt fighter. At number 6, we have Marcus Attilius, the free Roman citizen who shocked the empire by doing what rookies aren't supposed to do: destroy veterans. Unlike most gladiators who were slaves or prisoners of war, Attilius was a volunteer, an auctoratus who likely entered the arena to pay off crushing debts that threatened to destroy his life. This made him part of an elite class of free citizens who chose blood and sand over poverty and shame. The year was somewhere in the 1st century AD, and the Pompeii arena was about to witness an upset that people would talk about for generations. Attilius's very first recorded fight wasn't against another rookie learning the ropes. It was against Hilaris, a veteran gladiator with 13 consecutive victories carved on his record. 13 separate times, Hilaris had faced death and walked away victorious. 13 opponents had fallen to his blade. The man was a proven killer, a crowd favorite, someone who'd survived more than a dozen life-or-death encounters, while Attilius had exactly. The crowd expected a quick execution. They expected Hilarus to add another easy victory to his legend. They expected the volunteer. They got the Attilius. Relatively brief compared to gladiators who fought for many years. Speaking of lengthy careers, what would you do if someone offered you freedom 4 times and you refused every single time? The answer defies all logic. Number 5, Flamma, the man who refused paradise. At number 5, we have Flamma, the Syrian gladiator whose gravestone tells one of the most baffling stories in all of arena history. Born in Syria during the 2nd century AD under Emperor Hadrian's rule, Flamma was brought to the empire as a slave and trained as a secutor, the heavily armored gladiator type designed to hunt down the agile net-wielding retiarius. What we know about Flamma comes directly from his tombstone discovered in Sicily, and the numbers carved into that ancient stone are absolutely insane. 34 fights total, 21 victories where he stood over his defeated opponent, 9 draws where both fighters were so evenly matched that judges declared no winner, 4 defeats where Flamma lost but was granted mercy, allowed to live and fight another day. He died at age 30, which in gladiator years might as well be ancient. But here's where Flamma's story becomes truly bizarre. He was awarded the Rudis, the wooden sword symbolizing freedom and retirement, 4 separate times. 4 times. Most gladiators would sell their souls for one chance at freedom. Most would kill their best friend for the opportunity to walk out of the arena forever. Flamma was handed paradise not once, not twice, but 4 times. And 4 times he refused it. 4 times he chose to return to the blood-soaked sand. 4 times he picked up his weapons and walked back into the killing grounds. Ancient sources don't tell us why, but we can try to understand. Maybe he loved the glory and the roar of 50,000 screaming fans chanting his name. Maybe he was addicted to the adrenaline rush that only mortal combat can provide. Maybe life outside the arena held nothing for him. No family, no skills, no place in society. Or maybe, just maybe, he was so incredibly good at fighting that he couldn't imagine being anything else. Think about the brutal mathematics of survival here. Most gladiators died within their first 3 fights. The ones who survived 10 bouts were considered grizzled veterans. Flamma fought 34 times and lived through every single one, except the last. That's not luck. That's not chance. That's absolute mastery of the deadly art of arena combat. His victories weren't quick executions either. Those 9 draws tell us he regularly faced opponents so skilled that neither could gain an advantage. He fought the best and survived them all. He lands in Tier 2 because his record is carved in stone. Undeniable proof of one of the most successful gladiatorial careers in history. But he never led armies or changed the political landscape beyond the arena's walls. But what happens when gladiators do escape those walls and turn their weapons against Rome itself? The next entry features not 1, but 2 warriors whose duel became legend. Number 4, Priscus and Verus, the immortal duel. At number 4, we have not 1 but 2 gladiators whose names are forever linked by the most legendary fight in Roman history, Priscus and Verus. The year was 80 AD. The location was the brand new Flavian Amphitheater, what we now call the Colosseum, and it was opening day. Emperor Titus had commissioned 100 days of games to celebrate, and for the main event, he wanted something truly special. He wanted a fight that would be talked about for centuries. He got Priscus and Verus. Both men were of Celtic origin, both trained to elite levels, both perfectly matched in skill and experience. When they entered the arena that day, the poet Martial was sitting in the crowd. His poem Liber de Spectaculis gives us one of the only detailed descriptions we have of an actual gladiatorial fight, and what he describes is absolutely incredible. The fight went on for hours. Not the quick, brutal exchanges you might expect, but an absolute marathon of skill, endurance, and pure, unbreakable will. Priscus would attack with a combination. Verus would defend and counter. Back and forth they went, neither man able to gain even a temporary advantage. The crowd grew restless, then amazed, then completely reverent. This wasn't just combat anymore. This was art at the highest level. Blood flowed, sweat poured, the sun moved across the sky, and still neither fighter could overcome the other. Their weapons clashed again and again. Their shields took blow after thunderous blow. Their armor dented and cracked, but neither man fell. Then, as exhaustion finally began to take its toll, something unprecedented happened. Both fighters lowered their weapons at exactly the same moment. Not in defeat, not in surrender, in mutual respect and recognition. They couldn't beat each other, and they both knew it. To continue would simply be two masters destroying each other for no reason. Emperor Titus rose from his throne. In any other fight, in any other circumstance, this would be the moment where at least one man died. Custom demanded it. The crowd expected it. But Titus understood that he'd witnessed something truly special. He declared both men victors. Both were awarded the rudis, the wooden sword of freedom. Both walked out of the Colosseum as free men, their names immortalized together forever. They land in Tier 2 together because while their skill was absolutely undeniable and their story became the stuff of legend, they never faced the true horror of the arena, fighting when freedom wasn't an option, killing when mercy was forbidden, surviving when the emperor demanded blood and death. But the final two gladiators on our list didn't fight for glory or freedom or the roar of the crowd. They fought for something far more dangerous. They fought to make Rome itself pay in blood. Number 3, Crixus, the unbreakable Gaul. At number 3, we have Crixus, the Gallic berserker, whose name became forever synonymous with uncompromising violence and the refusal to bow. Born in Gaul and dragged to the ludus at Capua in chains, Crixus was a warrior from a culture that valued courage and honor above life itself. His name probably meant curly-haired in his native Gaulish language, but by the time Rome was finished with him, it meant something far more terrifying. Vengeance incarnate. 73 BC. Spartacus plans the Great Escape. 70 gladiators arm themselves with whatever they can grab, kitchen knives, table legs, training weapons, and smash their way out of captivity. Crixus is right there beside Spartacus, one of the core 5 leaders alongside Oenomaus, Gannicus, and Castus. These 5 men would spark a war that would shake Rome to its very foundation. But here's where Crixus differs from the others. While Spartacus eventually wanted to lead the slaves north to freedom beyond the Alps, while others wanted to escape and rebuild their lives, Crixus wanted something darker. He wanted Rome to bleed. He wanted revenge for every lash, every humiliation, every brother and sister sold into slavery. Crixus split from the main slave army and led his own contingent on absolutely brutal raids through southern Italy. Ancient historians describe his faction with a mixture of horror and grudging respect. They were the most fierce, the most savage, the most terrifyingly effective at spreading chaos. They didn't just fight Roman forces. They hunted them. They raided villas and estates, burning everything to ash. They showed Rome exactly what happened when you pushed warriors too far. In 72 BC, near Mount Garganus, a Roman force finally cornered Crixus and his warriors. The battle that followed was savage beyond description. Crixus could have retreated. He could have tried to rejoin Spartacus and the main army. He didn't. He stood his ground and fought until Roman swords finally cut him down. When Spartacus heard the news of his brother's death, he did something that shocked even Rome's hardened military commanders. He captured 300 Roman prisoners and forced them to fight to the death in gladiatorial games. Not for entertainment, not for profit, for revenge. It was a funeral rite, and the message carved in blood was crystal clear. You can kill Crixus, but his brothers will make you pay a price you'll never forget. 300 Roman lives to honor one Gallic warrior. That's the measure of Crixus's impact. That's the shadow his legend cast across history. He lands in Tier 1 because Crixus wasn't just a fighter. He was a symbol of resistance that terrified Rome. Every slave who heard his name remembered that Rome could bleed. Every Roman who heard it felt a chill of fear. His legacy transcended the arena and became part of the empire's nightmare. But if Crixus could make Rome tremble with, the man at number 2 would take that terror to a whole new level. Number XU2. Spartacus, the Rebel King. Part 1, at number 2. And yes, we're giving him an extended entry because his story demands it. We have Spartacus, the Thracian gladiator who became Rome's absolute worst nightmare. Born in Thrace, possibly serving as an auxiliary soldier in the Roman military before being enslaved for desertion, Spartacus was sold to Lentulus Batiatus's gladiator school in Capua. He was trained as a thriax, a lightly armored fighter known for speed, agility, and devastating curved swords. But Spartacus wasn't just skilled with weapons. He was brilliant in ways that would make military generals jealous. 73 BC. The conditions in the gladiator school were brutal beyond imagination. These men were property, beaten and starved, forced to kill each other for the entertainment of people who saw them as less than human. But Spartacus saw something different. He saw soldiers. He saw warriors. He saw an army waiting to be born. The escape plan wasn't just about breaking out. It was about survival, strategy, and turning a desperate dash for freedom into something Rome had never experienced before. A slave army that could actually fight back and win. Approximately 70 gladiators made the initial break, armed with whatever makeshift weapons they could grab from the kitchen. They overpowered their guards and fled into the countryside. Most slave revolts ended right there, scattered, disorganized, hunted down within days. But Spartacus had a vision. He didn't just run and hide. He recruited. Word spread like wildfire through the slave population of southern Italy. There was a gladiator leading a rebellion. There was a warrior who was fighting back. There was hope. Escaped slaves from farms and estates across the region flocked to Spartacus's banner by the thousands. The army swelled, first hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands. Modern historians estimate the total group, including non-combatants like families and camp followers, reached over 100,000 people. This wasn't a riot anymore. This was a migration. This was a nation of the oppressed rising up. Number Satyrs 2. Spartacus, the Rebel King. Part 2. Then came the battles, and this is where Spartacus proved he was something Rome had never seen before. Praetor Gaius Claudius Glaber thought he had the rebels trapped. He surrounded Spartacus's forces on Mount Vesuvius with 3,000 soldiers, blocking the only path down. It should have been over. Spartacus should have starved or surrendered. Instead, he had his men weave vines growing on the mountainside into ropes, rappel down the sheer cliffs under cover of darkness, circle behind the Roman camp, and slaughter them in their sleep. Rome sent more forces. Spartacus defeated them. They sent praetors with professional soldiers. Spartacus outmaneuvered them. They sent consuls with multiple legions. Spartacus beat them in open battle for 2 full years. This former slave turned southern Italy into an active war zone. Roman armies that had conquered nations couldn't stop one escaped gladiator and his followers. But here's what made Spartacus truly legendary. He didn't just win through luck or numbers. He won through genuine tactical brilliance. When facing Roman cavalry, he'd use terrain to neutralize their advantage. When outnumbered, he'd strike at night or use ambush tactics. When facing disciplined legions, he'd break their formations with unconventional strategies. He was fighting the greatest military power on earth, and winning. The end came in 71 BC, when Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome, who would go on to form the first triumvirate, took command with 6 full legions and unlimited resources. Even then, it took everything Crassus had. He built walls and fortifications to trap the slave army. He used every dirty trick in the Roman military handbook. The final battle was apocalyptic in scale. Spartacus fought at the front of his army until Roman swords finally cut him down. His body was never recovered from the thousands of dead littering the battlefield. Crassus crucified 6,000 captured rebels along the Appian Way. 6,000 crosses stretching for over 100 miles, bodies left to rot as a warning to anyone who dared dream of freedom. But here's what Rome couldn't kill: the idea. Spartacus proved that slaves weren't just property. They could think strategically. They could fight effectively. They could defeat Rome's best. His name became synonymous with rebellion, and for generations after, Roman writers treated it as a synonym for terror itself. He lands in Tier 1 at number 2 because Spartacus wasn't just deadly in the arena. He was deadly to the entire concept of Roman superiority. He proved that courage and intelligence matter more than legal status, and that legacy echoes through history even today. But wait, if Spartacus, the man who led the greatest slave rebellion in Roman history, is only number 2, then who could possibly be deadlier? The answer might surprise you. Number E1, Flamma, the eternal champion. At number 1, we're returning to Flamma, but this time with the full understanding of why he deserves the top spot. Everything we told you before was true. 34 fights, 21 victories, 9 draws, 4 defeats where he was spared, offered freedom 4 times and refused it every single time. But here's what makes Flamma the deadliest gladiator in Roman history. Spartacus fought for 2 years. Crixus fought for 2 years. They were brilliant, brave, and they changed history. But they fought armies, where individual skill mattered less than strategy and numbers. Flamma fought alone. 1 man, 1 weapon, 1 life on the line every single time. 34 separate occasions where death was 1 mistake away. 34 times where the crowd screamed for blood and Flamma had to deliver or die. No army backing him. Up. No strategic retreat. No second chances beyond those 4 merciful reprieves. Just skill, courage, and the absolute refusal to fall. Those 9 draws? They mean Flamma regularly faced opponents so skilled that neither could win. He fought the absolute best the empire could produce and survived them all. Those 21 victories. Each one was earned through sweat, blood, and perfection of technique, refined through hundreds of hours of brutal training. And he did this while refusing freedom 4 times. Think about that mindset. Think about the psychology of a man who could walk away but chooses to risk his life again and again. That's not just skill. That's something beyond normal human understanding. That's a warrior who found his purpose in the arena and refused to abandon it even when paradise was offered. His gravestone doesn't lie. Stone doesn't exaggerate. Those numbers are carved permanent proof that Flamma was the most successful gladiator in recorded Roman history. While Spartacus inspired armies and Crixus inspired fear, Flamma inspired something more fundamental: absolute respect for mastery of combat. He was the complete package. Endurance that let him fight into his 30s when most gladiators died in their first year. Skill that earned him 21 victories against trained killers. Mental strength that let him refuse freedom and return to almost certain death. And most importantly, the survival instinct that let him walk out alive 33 times. He is Tier 1, Position 1, the deadliest gladiator in Roman history because no one else combined longevity, skill, and sheer number of victories the way Flamma did. He didn't just survive the arena, he conquered it repeatedly and then chose to conquer it again. From Mevia's defiance of gender norms to Flamma's conquest of death itself, these 12 warriors represent something far deeper than mere combat skill. They represent the moment when the oppressed, the enslaved, the condemned rose up and forced Rome to acknowledge an uncomfortable truth, that courage, intelligence, and skill don't belong exclusively to the free. They began as slaves, criminals, showmen, and outlaws. They ended as legends who challenged everything Rome believed about power, about strength, about what it means to be truly dangerous. The arena was designed to control these warriors, to channel their violence into carefully managed entertainment. Instead, they used it as a stage to become immortal. Their stories echo across 2,000 years because they remind us that the human spirit cannot be permanently chained, and that sometimes the deadliest weapon isn't a sword or a spear. It's the simple, absolute refusal to accept defeat. So tell me, which gladiator would you choose to fight beside in the arena? The rebel king Spartacus, who nearly broke Rome? The immortal duo Priscus and Verus? The man who conquered death 33 times and refused freedom 4 times? Drop your answer below and let these legends live forever.